They go. Once we enter this compound, I know they follow you talk. Again, I'm just telling you my.
I don't have 25,000.
Okay, talk better thing. I say talk better thing. Make they go your. Make you turn here. They go your airport.
I don't have more than 2,000.
Okay, there they go. Oh.
You don't. If you want to help me, must I pay 25,000 naira?
Hello, sir. I know you cannot raise 75,000. I said talk something.
But that is what I told you. I just got my ticket in the car now. Do you want me to show you? My ticket in the car there is there. I just got it now.
What you are saying is very far. I said talk better thing, reasonable. Ask something to reasonable to that. Make it go your way.
Oga,
you understand it? I know there is no how you can raise 25,000. I'm a man like you.
Oga, if a man like me,
yes, and moreover, I'm open up for you. I'm not working alone.
You know that I won't stand on that ground and risk paying a bigger amount when I get. I don't have.
Okay.
You get?
Ask something reasonable. Make it go. Let me call them in your presence. I'm not working alone.
What is? I don't live here. I came here to come collect something. Now, if I have 5,000 naira on me. If I cannot, at least I'm going back to Aja. I'm coming back to the airport tomorrow. How do you want me to live? How do I live? If I drop all the I've told you. See, should I show you my ticket?
Listen, not be $50, $20, and other dollars dated.
But I told you I have to pay excess luggage. That was where I offered.
So all those are $50 and this by the time you will use all of them for excess luggage.
Okay.
Now they speak grammar because by the time when speak no go date two of us, so you go take my own because I will continue my work.
Okay.
Add something to that money, make it.
I don't have.
You don't have.
I don't.
Go. Let's get it. Don't worry. Or if you have any call, you can make it before we proceed. Let me talk and sit down. Let me.
You cannot help me because I cannot put more money to it, to the 2,000 naira.
I have related with you like my own brother, like a friend, so that.
Have I not spoken to you like a man to tell you what I have?
If it's possible from that side they come here, you think I will still be inside?
So you think I'll waste my time here if I have more money to add?
Okay, answer me. I'm not working in. If I'm working in, even if I want us, I collect from you. Nobody will go in. Hello, Wasi. Yeah, Wasi. I beg that motor, that jeep when I carry come out for here. It's not ready. You just tell Oga make you book him. I want that motor. No, you're not there ready. They beg me 2,000 naira.
Africa arise. Let's fight corruption in our continent. In our continent. Africa arise. Let's fight corruption in our continent. In our continent. Africa, Africa, hey. Say no to corruption, Africa. Africa, hey. Say no to corruption, Africa. Africa, hey. Say no to corruption, Africa. Africa, oh. Say no to corruption. We can live in a better place if we fight against corruption.
Corruption undermines democratic institutions, retards economic development, and contributes to government instability. Corruption distorts electoral processes, perverting the rule of law and creating bureaucratic quagmires whose only reason for existence is soliciting of bribes. Economic development is stunted because outside direct investment is discouraged, and small businesses on the continent often find it impossible to overcome the start-up costs required because of corruption. According to Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, corruption hurts the poor disproportionately by diverting funds intended for development, undermining a government's ability to provide basic services, feeding inequality and justice, and discouraging foreign investment and aid.
Vous savez que la corruption a été le mal qui a gangréné le développement et la stabilité démocratique en Afrique. Aujourd'hui, le mouvement de la jeunesse africaine a compris que c'est un fléau fondamental qui nous détruit et on se mobilise aujourd'hui pour lutter contre ce phénomène corrosif et pour lequel je demande à tous les citoyens africains de prendre des mesures vigoureuses afin que le développement et la pauvreté soient loin de la Guinée. Vous savez que nous sommes dans la compétition pour les objectifs du millénaire pour le développement en 2015, goal, et il faudrait que l'Afrique tienne. Mais pour tenir, il faut combattre la corruption. Quand vous voyez les ressources que nous avons, le secteur minier, le secteur de nos mers, la pêche, l'Afrique est riche. Mais pourquoi nous ne progressons pas? C'est la corruption, malgouvernance, le manque de démocratie. Ce déficit va jouer sur nous si nous ne prenons pas conscience.
In accordance, the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, several African countries have set up specialized anti-corruption authorities and enacted progressive anti-corruption laws in their respective jurisdictions towards curbing the menace of corruption. Why then is corruption still a big problem in Africa?
I would say that corruption is still a major problem in spite of the strong legislative frameworks that many of our countries have put in place. Partly because these frameworks are relatively new. For some countries, we're still working on them. Ghana, for example, has made significant progress in terms of specific legislation, the Assets Declaration regime. We have a Whistleblowers Act. But we're still having to rework a number of those pieces of legislation. So I don't think within Africa we've got a significant number of countries that have had their legislative frameworks in place for a long enough time and have put those frameworks to the test, with corruption cases, such that we would see those frameworks actually starting to bear fruit. I think it's still almost early days, and it's surprising to talk about maybe 20 years in some cases as early days, but it takes a while for legislation to really be fine-tuned, to find out that some legislation is not achieving what it's intended to.
In addition to the adequacy of legislative frameworks, there is a big concern regarding the level of political will and independence enjoyed by anti-corruption authorities across the continent in order for them to discharge their mandates effectively.
I'm not going to say independent national anti-corruption bodies because I believe that they are not independent. And usually what happens is state interference make them very weak to deliver their mandate at national level. And we realize in Africa that politicians sometimes even use them for the political agenda. So how do we make sure? And that's, I think, one of also the topic that has to be brought into the agenda when we discuss corruption issues and integrity framework. How do we reinforce the independence of those bodies?
One of the challenges across Africa with respect to the credibility of a number of anti-corruption institutions has been this issue around selective prosecution and corrupt charges being used to quell opposition and being used as a tool, political tool, to fight those that are not perhaps politically favored. And we have seen conspiracy theories in this regard emerging in various countries across the continent.
Leaders in Africa should allow the anti-corruption agencies or authorities to work independently. You have created them. Give them the mandate to deliver. If they investigate a minister, let them investigate. If they want to prosecute a minister, let them prosecute. But if you put so much hurdles in the names of checks and balances, we go nowhere. We go nowhere.
Les chefs de gouvernement, les chefs d'État doivent prendre un engagement sérieux dans la lutte contre la corruption. C'est-à-dire, ce qui est nécessaire, c'est uniquement la volonté politique. Si le chef d'État est engagé, si le chef de gouvernement est engagé, c'est-à-dire que toutes les institutions étatiques, c'est-à-dire que tous les pouvoirs c'est-à-dire que tous les services publics seront engagés. En cas du contraire, nous serons punis lorsque la volonté politique et sans doute elle va aboutir s'il y a la pleine
I think for leaders, showing that they are committed to anti-corruption, making statement after statement against corruption, even if it sounds tiring, they have to do that because the anti-corruption agencies need to know that their leaders have their back.
So political will is the ability and the commitment of the country through the top leadership to allow the anti-corruption agency to be operationally independent and deliver. Because fighting corruption is a specialized knowledge. Corruption is not like any other offense. Murder. If there is a murder, you'll find a dead body. You find a knife or a gun or a bullet. If it's robbery, you'll find force used. There must be evidence that is so clear. You don't need a silver bullet to discover this was robbery. But when we come to corruption, it's totally different. We talked about procurement. So when the money exchanges hands in secrecy, in the dark, there's nothing that is remaining to trace and reconstruct the case. So the knowledge that goes into investigating corruption is a specialized knowledge.
Anti-corruption authorities ought to have a clear mandate to combat corruption holistically through prevention, education, awareness raising, investigation, and prosecution, either within one institution or within multiple coordinated institutions.
Give these agencies a constitutional mandate to discharge their responsibility. Why? Because the Constitution is the mother of all laws. If the agency is anchored in the Constitution, it's difficult for any regime to change it, because you cannot just change the Constitution overnight.
We as agents of fighting corruption must have the power to arrest. We must have the power to detain persons, the power to put persons on bail, the powers to freeze assets, and also access to information. Take for example, a lot of corruption today is forensic. It's through the banks. If you have banking secrecy laws that do not allow you access to the banking information, you'll fail. So that is why part of the laws in strengthening the capacity of anti-corruption agencies, you must have access to that information in the banks.
The permanence and stability of anti-corruption agencies should be assured by law, or even better, by the Constitution. Institutions established by government decree may often be too easy to dismantle, as we have witnessed in several countries.
The anti-corruption agency must have a permanence, not a temporary agency. Permanence. You don't just abolish it, just like that. It must have a permanence.
Those agencies that already exist should be strengthened and promoted.
C'est pour la première fois au Bénin qu'une structure de lutte contre la corruption a été créée par une loi. Nous avons pour mission de prévenir la corruption et également nous sommes appelés à appuyer la justice lorsqu'elle doit réprimer la corruption. S'agissant de la prévention, nous avons pour mission de mettre en place les dispositifs qui ont pour but de freiner la corruption à défaut de l'éradiquer. Et nous sommes tenus de rendre compte à l'Assemblée nationale, au président de la République, une fois que l'an. Nous sommes une structure indépendante. Nous avons une indépendance, une autonomie totale s'agissant des actions. Autonomie totale en matière de gestion. Voilà en gros la structure de lutte contre la corruption que nous appelons Autorité nationale de lutte contre la corruption.
Also important is the quality regarding the leadership of anti-corruption authorities, which is absolutely crucial.
Now, there are a number of issues that pertain to the leadership of anti-corruption institutions. Firstly, it's the appointment, the process for appointing, removal, and the continuity of heads of anti-corruption authorities, as well as the type of immunity that they enjoy. The heads of anti-corruption authorities should be appointed through a process that ensures their impartiality, their independence, neutrality, integrity, and of course competence.
The head of the agency must be given security of tenure for him or her to discharge that responsibility without fear or favor. If you don't have a security of tenure, how do you discharge such onerous responsibility?
Currently, I know in the ombudsman circles that some of our colleagues have lost their jobs when they tackle what they refer to as the big fish. It's okay when you clean up downstairs, but once you go higher in the building, often the leadership wavers, and we would like the AU to make sure that that commitment is across the board. There's no impunity regardless of who is involved.
Heads of anti-corruption institutions should have security of tenure and should only be removed through a legally established procedure. In other words, through, you can call it an impeachment procedure. It should not be possible for a head of state to simply remove the head of an anti-corruption authority. Moreover, in the absence of the head of an anti-corruption authority due to suspension, dismissal, resignation, retirement, or end of tenure, all of his or her powers should be delegated to an appropriate official until the appointment of a new head of the authority. And this is important so as not to paralyze the institution in the interim period and in order to ensure continuity. In order to protect heads of anti-corruption authorities, they should have immunity from civil and criminal proceedings for acts committed within the performance of their mandate so as not to be harassed by malicious proceedings.
It is absolutely critical in the fight against corruption to ensure that anti-corruption authorities in Africa have the necessary human and financial resources to enable them to discharge their mandate effectively.
In terms of funding, they do not have adequate funds in many cases to fight corruption. And corruption has several, fighting corruption has several levels. The investigation level, the prosecution level, the civic education level. There's so many levels of it. Many of them do not have the resources to do it, and they do also not have the political backup, because you need that political backup that the political leaders will not interfere into what you're doing. They will give you absolute autonomy to do what you're doing, and no matter how highly placed a public official or a private sector person may be in society, you should be able to apprehend the person, if there are evidences of corruption.
Almost all the anti-corruption agencies are complaining about lack of financial resources. This is also the case in my country, where the Anti-Corruption Commission, which is actually supposed to service a population of 1.1 million, is not properly funded. I can make an example right now. We, in a population of 1.1 million, we only have 10 investigators to fight corruption. In my opinion, that is inadequate for making a meaningful impact. So if only that could be prioritized, we could move forward to realizing better results.
Second argument to my second point, give these institutions enough resources if you want these agencies to deliver. You create an agency and you call it anti-corruption agency. You give them 20 people for a population of 20 million people. What do you expect Are you going to blame the agents and call it a toothless bulldog? Because you didn't give the resources that goes with the responsibility.
When you look at the budget, there must be a meaningful contribution as far as the budget is concerned. Some people have argued that you need about 0.001% of the country's GDP to make sure that you are able to tackle corruption effectively. But once you don't demonstrate that in terms of capacity, the institution via resources, then that means we're just talking, not talking about anything.
It must have the capacity and ability to recruit its own staff, and those staff must be properly remunerated.
So it's a matter of institution building then, and in the second step you have to build capacity for these institutions to fight corruption, because the corrupt people are very, very imaginative, and they always have new ways of doing their business, and we have to be more intelligent than they are. We have to find in advance what are their plans.
It is also important for anti-corruption authorities in Africa to have the necessary access to information in order to carry out their investigative and prosecuting mandates effectively.
Freedom of information. If you do not have access to the information, there is no way you can have effective investigations. And it will lead to success in court. Those of us that are lawyers, you know that a lawyer is as good as his case. When the investigation is bad, your case is bad. Sometimes we blame the judges, and I personally blame them many times. But it is clear also that we have faulty investigative grounds. So unless the investigative base is strengthened, we need to have forensic access, the tools that are necessary, and then quality and capacity development in the area of investigation, such that when we take our cases to court, they are foolproof cases for those of us that have the threshold of proof beyond reasonable doubt.
Anti-corruption authorities should not operate in isolation, but through collaboration with other national and international actors, including civil society, faith-based institutions, and the media.
And also, it's not just about the anti-corruption agencies themselves, it's about the partnerships that come into play in that country, because normally they look upon just the anti-corruption agency to be the savior in terms of fighting corruption, only to find that collaboratively as a nation you need to have stakeholders who are joining hands in the fight against corruption for it to be effective. So right now in our country, it's only just the Anti-Corruption Commission that is fighting corruption. That is why maybe the impact is not so much felt.
And that we must sensitize all levels of society, civil society. Judiciary is very important, because we can do all the way. Go to court, someone gets a very lenient sentence. There's no difference. The judiciary must understand that corruption is an evil and must be taken seriously. Penalty must affect the seriousness of the case.
In common law countries, the legal burden is very difficult to reverse. And that is why, as we talk about capacitating the anti-corruption agencies, we should not forget about the judges. Because the judges also have to buy into the progress that is being made in the fight against corruption. Because if we move too far ahead of the judges, we come back to base, the judges refuse to understand what has changed in the dynamics of the law.
And at the same time, while we are fighting corruption, we have to have an important policy of prevention. We have to start with the elementary schools by teaching our students and pupils new values of integrity, of transparency, of accountability, and that's the only way they can really change the situation, because This might take a few decades, I would say, but we have to start sometime in order to succeed.
We have had an interesting conversation about promoting and strengthening the independence and effectiveness of anti-corruption agencies in Africa. From the foregoing engagement in this episode, it is clear that in order to fight corruption effectively on the continent, African countries need to establish, maintain, and strengthen independent national anti-corruption authorities or agencies in accordance with the provisions of Article 5 of the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption and the Jakarta Principles for Anti-Corruption Agencies.
Dans la corruption, ouais. Dans la corruption, Africa dans la corruption, ouais. À la corruption, on fait accentuer famine, conséquences maladie, à cause de la corruption.
Riche continent, dépourvu d'évolution due à la mauvaise gouvernance politique et financière, nos richesses volées, une éducation corrompue qui promouvoit la voyoucratie sénile dans les rues d'Afrique. Lève-toi Afrique, et bats-toi contre la corruption qui détruit les mœurs et ton avenir.